Hey, this is Madalyn Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. Let's jump right in. We start with some amazing news. Madalyn, this is one that you came across during the week. What have you found from Andrew this week?
Yeah, Space's dashboard, they have made a huge announcement that there's now over 1 million Spaces hosts on Twitter. And I'm blown away. You know, recently Andrew was hinting how close we were to hitting 1 million. I mean, when you try to think of that number, like that many people that have hosted rooms in the past year and a half is mind-blowing. Because it's just hard to imagine that Spaces is really that huge and having that. We know it's huge. We know it's an impact, huge impact. But 1 million, that's a humongous number. So it's happened. And in the second tweet, I put up here in the nest because there's a link and you tap on that or click on it. And you can see, like, as of right now, what are the current stats with Twitter Spaces through the Spaces dashboard. And it lets you know, like right now, there's live spaces, 2,480 live spaces right now with 61,000 participants and 8,100 speakers, which is mind-blowing. And as you scroll through this, it lets you know how many upcoming spaces, how many have ended, how many spaces creators, which is what this tweet was about, how many creators in the last 7 days, in the last 24 hours, and even ticketed spaces. And this is so interesting, Suze, because we've never really known what the numbers were with ticketed spaces. I was curious if people were using it, how often, and it lets you know that there's been a total of 687 ticketed spaces. So there are people using it.
Yeah, I think it must be such a tiny group. I mean, when you think about the numbers you've just given there, and then really in relation to that tiny number of ticketed spaces that might be happening. I mean, I've been on the wait list for just about forever since the day they announced it. And I still go in there and hit the monetization thing in the settings and it still says, yep, we'll get back to you soon. So I think they're obviously still testing it with that small group. People are clearly using it. And I think this is the thing. When I think about 1 million Spaces hosts, just think about all the different ways, the different conversations, the different things that people are saying and presenting right here on Spaces. Really, what we know and the people that we drop into and all of that, it's just the tiniest tip of the iceberg of what there really is out there. And I just find that so exciting just to consider that. But it's just that number, 1 million hosts, that is just incredible.
It really is. So I love that Spaces dashboard has a page here of just the stats. So you could always go in here at any time and see what are the numbers? Where is it at? And I just love that. So I love this page. So I wanted to share this in the nest with you all. I think this is just a huge milestone to know that there's over 1 million Spaces hosts. Just unbelievable.
So as we said, over 1 million Spaces hosts. I've just alluded to the fact that there's clearly going to be lots of spaces that none of us here have ever heard of, have ever dived into, have ever come across. And our next tweet is once again about discoverability. So during the week, Spaces, the Twitter Spaces official account actually tweeted out one of their kind of pop arty pictures of a pair of hands holding some binoculars and an eye looking through it, a little face. Logging in, it says, ready to find a space. And you know what? I got a little bit angry. I mean, I get what they're saying. I'm logging in, I'm ready to find a space and I'm looking around. But my response to it was exactly how are we supposed to find a space at the moment? Now, my tweet response to this was verbatim this. The removal of the Spaces tab in favour of the audio tab takes us back to square one in terms of native discoverability. The audio tab is more listen to what we give you than, oh, what can I find? I'm kind of confused by the official Spaces account saying, considering that people can still go in there and just find a space. I have absolutely no way of just finding a space right now other than diving into whatever the algorithm serves to me up on the Spaces bar or whatever it is that I'm shown in a playlist on the audio tab. Now, I get not everybody's got the audio tab. And I know each week I have to climb myself down and remind myself the tab's in beta, remind myself that actually the product team at Twitter have been really engaged with what I've had to say, and I've had DMs and things have gone back and forth, and there is definitely live conversation around them updating, changing the audio tab, but I'm really not liking it. And to say that you can just jump in and find a space as someone who is really interested in spaces and at the moment is limited to kind of seeing 2 or 3 pop up a day, generally 2 or 3 that I'm actually not that interested in, is really frustrating. There you go, rant over.
It really is. It really is. I was quite surprised by this tweet, knowing that they're testing this new audio tab. They know we can't easily discover. The algorithm is telling us what they want us to look at. And I loved your tweet. I loved your response to them. I wish they would have replied to you, but I'm not surprised they didn't. But I replied to you, and I was like total agreement. And I even said in my tweet that this is causing me to go use Spaces Dashboard daily, and I'm okay with that. Look, there is something out there that makes discoverability super easy. It's a free website, spacesdashboard.com. So that's where I'm going to go. Twitter could keep things easier by allowing discoverability right in the app. But if they're not going to with this new audio tab, then that's where I'm going to go. And the thing is, I also said in this tweet, it just makes no sense to me. Why would you take away something that's part of an ease of use? Like, they made it so easy for us to discover, to do a search, to, get an idea of what conversations are going on. Instead, they're just leaving us with the space bar at the top, right? And the space bar has never been that great. We didn't like it when that was all we had. We'd complain that, like, okay, this doesn't really give us much discoverability. We'll take it, but it's not much. But if they're going to just leave us with this new audio tab, very little discoverability for me. I mean, when you look at this new audio tab we have, Suze, what's in there for us to discover? People's rooms we already know about. When I go in there and it's the people I follow or friends that have spoken in these rooms I already know about. They're not showing me something I don't already know about. Are you finding that too?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's pretty much confirmed that essentially what you're seeing is the spaces of people that you follow. I think that's kind of how they're doing it. That's how they're serving it up to you. But I get that this is in beta and that, I might log in tomorrow or I might go back to it in a minute having updated the app and it might be completely gone. Like, I might have no audio tab. I might have no spaces tab. I might go back to the spaces tab. Who knows what iteration of the app I might end up with. But I think what's so frustrating for me is that I've got no idea how long this audio tab beta is just going to look the same. To me, I'm sure they're working on it in the back end, but it's not helpful in terms of, we've had about 2, maybe 3 weeks now, and I'm not the only one there saying discoverability is a massive issue still here. And while they might be tweaking things and, they've added you can give a thumb down to something that you're not necessarily interested in listening to and those kind of things, I'm not seeing any big moves to help with the discoverability of spaces. And, spaces is a big deal for Twitter, really. We've just said they've got 1 million hosts using this feature on their platform. So why would you take away anything that is going to prevent people from being able to access and find the content that people are creating? For a start, hosts will stop creating it because people can't find it, so they're not listening to it. It just feels like the longer they let this go on for, the more negative impact it might have. That's what I'm concerned about. And it'll be difficult to crawl back up from that. People are still saying things like Clubhouse is dead. Oh, look at the stats, it peaked and then it dropped. That was just off the back of a load of stats that came out probably almost a year ago now. And people are still very much got that negative image of like social audio isn't really a thing in their mind. It doesn't take much. The minute people can't hear things, can't find things, it's really going to have an impact.
I agree. Absolutely. That's why I'm just spending my time in Spaces Dashboard, and it's okay. It's like, I'll do it. I'm all right. I just am surprised at why Twitter would do this. It makes you also wonder how many people have this new audio tab. What are other people saying about it? I haven't heard anybody say anything positive about it that does have it. I've only heard people complain about it.
I think there are positive points to it, but I think the lack of discoverability for Spaces outweighs it. And unfortunately, while I get that the audio tab probably isn't just there for Spaces creatives and, hardcore audio podcasters, all the rest of it, it's there as a kind of browsing tool for people that might not know that audio has been integrated into Twitter. I understand that might be their primary reason for putting it together, but I don't see the point of annoying the people that are actually using it and that are creating the audio on the platform at the same time. So, it's odd. And it feels like of all the fast moving things that we've seen on Spaces, they could be jumping a bit higher on the discoverability thing. I mean, it was what we banged on about for weeks and for months in the early stages. And I just feel like we're having the same conversations again. And it's such a shame.
I agree, totally. So this next tweet's interesting. You're having some issues with the clips feature. Are you still having it now? Because your tweet was from last week.
Yeah, so this was actually pretty much after our space last week. And there's kind of two issues here. One was the fact that I was trying to use the clipping feature for the first time in a long time since it had been improved, so I'd heard. And the clip was actually talking about the autoplay on the audio tab and how we didn't like it. And I thought, right, I'm going to tweet that out, let people know that we spoke about it on All Things Audio. And so I used the clip feature, but when my clip came up, I had no captions and I couldn't hear the clip. Every time I clicked on the card, it just took me to the main space where I could hear the whole thing, which was great, but I couldn't hear the actual clip that I'd just taken. So I don't know, still glitchy for me. Just wondered if it was still glitchy for anyone else. I was kind of I thought that they'd done some improvements, that it was kind of working a little bit better than that, and that you were able to be a little bit more specific about those 30 seconds that you were clipping. But yeah, certainly for me last week, it wasn't working seamlessly. So yeah, is it working for you, Madalyn? Have you used it recently?
Yeah, so what's interesting, when I saw your tweet, it was working fine for me. And I remember replying to you to let you know I was on desktop and it was fine for me. And so here we are talking about it right now. And, when you were first talking about it, I see it on my screen on my desktop is working fine. And then all of a sudden it stopped. And I'm like, wait a minute. Now we're talking about it. And it literally just stopped in front of me. And so I refreshed my page and it still was gone for a second, but now it's back. So maybe it's a little glitchy at the moment, but I know I was very anti this clips feature for a long time because it would never work properly. And then one of my biggest frustrations was that when they added it on desktop, so you could see it on desktop, it wasn't obvious on desktop. So like you could only now we know we can create it on both mobile and desktop, but at one time you could only create them on mobile and you could only see it on mobile. And then they added desktop just for seeing it, for being able to view it. And I was very excited when that happened because I'm usually on desktop more than mobile anyway. And I was so frustrated when they first made that change a while back because I would be on desktop and it just looked like the regular Twitter card for a space with the whole recording. It was not apparent. It was a clip. It wasn't obvious. But if you went to mobile and looked at that tweet, it was a clip. And I'm thinking, well, why did they add desktop if they're not even making it work properly? So it just made me dislike this feature even more. And because I had so many problems with it anyway, I just wasn't using it. I didn't have anything good to say about it. And then all of a sudden, it seemed like they kind of flipped the switch once they made it available to create one on desktop. It seemed like it started working better, but I didn't see the captions at first, and other people said the same thing. And then it seemed like within a week or so, I think Twitter must have been paying attention or something, because I know we talked about it quite a bit here. And somebody from Twitter was even, listening to told me they were listening to our replay. And then all of a sudden that next week, the whole thing was working great. And I haven't had any issues until just now. And I'm looking at my screen while you're talking. I'm like, wait a minute, where did the text go? But now I'm seeing it back. So I don't know. Maybe it's just a little buggy.
Maybe it just needs warming up.
Maybe. But right now I'm looking at it and I can see the transcript coming up, the captions coming up from your clip, from your original tweet. So, and this is on desktop and it looks fine.
I mean, it's a great way to promote a conversation that's been had in a space. And I do really like the fact that they've added it on. Even the card is quite simple and straightforward. Maybe it'd be nice to be able to add your own custom graphic to it or brand it up or whatever. But in essence, if it works in the way that it's supposed to work, it does everything perfectly. It takes a clip, it gives you the captions, it shows, through the animated waveform that it's something you can listen to. It's not something that autoplays. You can turn the sound on and off, and you can access the full space if you're then interested in that clip that you've previewed and heard. So it's got a lot going for it, and I really like it as a tool in the Spaces host toolkit. But yeah, I just need it to be a bit more consistent.
I agree. So hopefully they're still fine-tuning it. And we got Clubhouse news now. Clubhouse is still making news. I like that.
Yeah, we have. So Michael Sterling, who's here with us in the space today, has posted a fantastic thread about a new feature for houses over on Clubhouse that's in beta. It's called The Lounge. I mean, I'm loving the house metaphor. They're definitely going with that. Yeah, it sounds really good. I did jump into the lounge earlier today for one of the rooms that I am a member of. I believe it's like a kind of hallway. So essentially I could have listened in to people that were in that room at the time having a chat and then decided whether or not I actually wanted to go in and join them in the room. Prior to this lounge feature being there, you couldn't tell, I don't think, whether or not there was kind of a conversation going on in the room or who was there. Although Michael might actually be able to give us, well, I know he'll be able to give us way more information. And if I'm wrong, he can definitely correct me. But this thread tells us all about it. He says, the lounge in Clubhouse, essentially a dedicated room accessible in the house hallway via a mini player. Upon entering a house, members will see the lounge and whether anyone is in there. And if there's someone there, you can hear what they're saying because you're in the lounge. So, yeah, it's a good way of kind of just eavesdropping on what's going on in the room, I suppose, before you decide whether or not you want to spend your time in there. There are no mods in the lounge, no links, no audio or caption controls. It's very, very basic, like you can literally listen in via the player. The room chat is enabled, but that clears once the lounge is stopped. So, yeah, it's kind of like mini Clubhouse in a way. So we've gone from, hallway and lots of public rooms going on right down to these individual houses, where people are kind of very much having more intimate, more invite-only conversations. Quite regular space rooms still going on over there in those houses, but kind of very much of very specific topics or ideas being discussed. And now we have the lounge. So, yeah, very exciting to see them broadening that out and working out what the next kind of step for the different Clubhouse rooms and houses are over there. So interesting. But yeah, looking forward, if Michael's able to, in a while, to hearing what Michael has to say about it, because I know he's over on Clubhouse a lot more than I am.
Yeah, it sounds super interesting. I definitely want to hear about that too. And then the other piece of news from Clubhouse is long-awaited block list. Well, that sounds like a good thing to have, to be able to go through and see who all you block on the app. I guess you couldn't do that before. You could block people, but you couldn't see the list.
I think so. I think that's the issue. Yeah. So again, another tweet from Michael. Thank you very much for bringing this to our attention. You've tagged it All Things Audio and we spotted it. It says this is for iOS for now and Android coming soon. Clubhouse users can now see who they've blocked on the app. So you can go to the gear icon for the settings when you're in your full profile. You can choose blocked users and then you'll be able to see the profiles of the people that you've blocked. And you're also given the option there with a button to unblock them if you want to. But it does mean that you can obviously see who it is that you've blocked in the past. And kind of assess that for yourself and decide whether or not you want to let them back in. Of your own accord. So it's a good feature. I think it's good to have that list. I mean, I know here on Twitter we've got a very similar thing. You can go along and see whose tweets you've blocked and prevented from being seen. Those kind of things I think are always good in terms of having the control over your account and being able to just have that extra layer of security, I guess.
Absolutely. I think it's really smart that they did that. Even though I'm not really on Clubhouse much, I like features. I like being able to give us more than we need. because it's something for everyone. And most of us do want to be able to go back and see a list of who we blocked. Last week, you talked about Amazon AMP, and I love that you did this tweet. Just curious who else was using it. Morgan chimed in. Y'all had a great little conversation about this.
Yeah, so this I actually posted over in the All Things Audio community. Was just kind of chatting about the fact that we'd mentioned Amazon AMP having launched a web player last week. Thanks to George, who pointed out that although I'm here in the UK and very clearly had the message on my screen that it wasn't available in my territory, I could use a VPN in order to access it, which was very smart. It would appear that that's exactly what Morgan went along and did, and he's checked it out. It seems very much of this, I don't know what it is with these apps at the moment, but they just want to offer us stuff. They're not too keen on giving us an awful lot of choice. So yeah, it would appear that from Morgan's review of it, the web player doesn't let you choose what you want to listen to. It's not like you've got kind of a list of different hosts there or even different genres of music that you might want to tap into. It's all about just listening to the stream that they are offering up to you at the time. You can skip the current stream, but you can't see anyone that's on stage. You see the cover art for the current song on that web app, and that's just about it. So you can sort of hear the stream as it's going on. AMP is the, be a DJ social audio platform. That's how Amazon's trying to put itself, personalize itself within the realms of social audio at the moment. So the idea is that you can use the music that's available to you from Amazon Music within your show. And so people are basically becoming their own DJ and creating their own playlists and presenting that as you might hear on a radio show. So I think it's a really exciting idea. I know it's not the full Amazon Music catalogue that's available to people, and some people have sort of had words to say about that, sort of having a limited number of kind of songs to choose from or genres or whatever. But I still think it's interesting for them to be exploring it. It would be really great if we could just have access to it and have a play with it, really. I would really love to have a go. But yeah, it's just not available over here right now. It is US only. But listening via VPN does work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember when I first went on it a long time ago when it was brand new, it was interesting how it didn't really let you choose. It just kind of skips from stream to stream. It was different for sure. It seemed very basic to me. I thought by now they would have done more with it. But in this tweet from Michael Sterling, he says Amazon is all in with this as their social audio platform and that he's already seen a couple of national TV spots for it, which I find interesting because he says that Spaces and Clubhouse have yet to air an ad on TV. But then again, I mean, we're talking about Amazon, who is like, crazy rich company. So they can afford to do it like it's nothing to, do these expensive TV ads. But that really shows that they are all in if they're going to invest that kind of money into their marketing.
Yeah, that's true. But there's also that argument to say, well, people who are on Clubhouse are very much listeners and not viewers, potentially. So perhaps that's just an understanding of your audience. Like if I'm suggesting to someone who wants to up their podcast audience, I'd be saying to them, your part of your marketing budget needs to go on audio ads because you need to meet your audience where they are and they're listening. So go to a platform where they're listening and market yourself there. And so for Clubhouse, that's kind of, I wouldn't see them as being TV advertisers because they are completely all about listening and hearing. Whereas Amazon is so broad and has so many different strands to the business of what it does, I guess, as well as all the money behind it, that, a TV ad for something that they're doing is a completely different, outlook. But yeah, interesting to hear that they're advertising. And yeah, as Michael says, it shows they're definitely not going to just drop it if they're spending money on TV advertising for it. So they've obviously got a plan.
Exactly. Most definitely. So you found an interesting article talking about Amazon Live.
Yeah, I did. And in fact, my tweet doesn't really explain it particularly well now I look at it again. But this is actually an article from Insider Intelligence, which is headlined, "It will take more than a creator fund for Amazon's live audio push to work." So this is actually talking about the fact that Amazon AMP have a creator fund like all the other social audio apps that we have, we've seen them all do it. Spotify tried to do it briefly. Twitter Spaces had their Spark Creator Fund as well. The idea of this is that people on Amazon AMP will have monthly payouts depending on their show performance. And kind of the crux of this article really was, Amazon's just following what Clubhouse has done, what Spotify's tried to do. It's just another one of the same. And I think perhaps my thought on this is that right at the very end of it, they actually use the eMarketer, the Edison Research graph there to show social audio services used by teenagers and adults as of January this year. And we did mention this at the time when the Infinite Dial stats came out. But, just 2% of the population using Twitter Spaces, 1% Clubhouse and 1% Spotify Green Room, as it was earlier in the year. They're still very small numbers. I mean, we started this today by talking about there being 1 million Spaces hosts. It's huge in terms of being here on Twitter and users and all of that kind of thing. But in terms of the wider global world and the content that is out there to consume, there is still an awful lot of people who don't know what social audio is, don't know that it's available, what Twitter Spaces is and how to access it. And these very tiny numbers show that. But what they also show is that there is just so much room for different things, different initiatives to crop up, different ways of it being used. This thing is going to change and evolve, and it does every week, every day, as we see. And over the years, we're going to see this journey. I don't think it's going away anywhere. I think these numbers are small, but they're only going to grow. And maybe Amazon AMP, yes, it's a social audio platform. Does that make it a copycat? I don't know. It makes it another social audio platform in my mind. But just interesting to see, they're saying, oh, it's just copying. But when you think about the number of people that are still kind of unaware of what social audio is and what it can do, I still think there's just so far to go.
I'm with you on that for sure. And then Spotify Live, just when I thought, what's going on with Spotify Live? Are people still using it? Then they go into the news by having this major crash on the server.
Yeah, so I picked this up on the NME site. So fans of Ghost actually crashed Spotify Live servers, which meant that they couldn't do a Q&A that they planned to do on the platform with their fans. Now, as far as I can tell, this was like an exclusive Q&A. Potentially fans were kind of invited along to speak to the band. I have to say, I've no idea who Ghost are, but maybe that's the point.
I'm the same. I never heard of them, but in this article, it says that they have 10.5 million monthly listeners.
I know.
For the count. And it's like, whoa. So they're huge.
Bigger than Iron Maiden on Spotify, apparently. They appear to be massive. It says Ghost.
They're a big deal.
Yeah, Ghost Spotify popularity stands at a 10.5 million monthly listener count, exceeding that of other metal and rock bands like Slipknot, Iron Maiden, Disturbed and Tool. Now, I've definitely heard of them, but I haven't heard of Ghost, and they managed to bring down Spotify Live. Now, partly you think, well, all the different surveys, audience surveys, everything that we've heard about Spotify this year, it's all about, if you want to reach Gen Z, that's where you're going to go. This is a younger audience. Potentially Ghost are therefore for a younger audience. They're probably all over TikTok. That's why I've not heard of them. But just incredible to think that they've, brought down the servers. People are actually using Spotify Live, Madalyn. I mean, that's the crux of the story for me. That blew me away.
It's exciting to hear, especially with musicians. When this first came out, I remember we talked about how Spotify bought this app that was already in existence, a social audio app, and it was primarily for sports fans, right? It was like sports talk kind of an app. And I thought, well, that's interesting, but I would think that they want to incorporate music into this. Like, how great that you chat with your favorite bands, like get the bands to use this app, have conversations, have Q&As, whatever. Like, so much you think they would do with it, and it just wasn't happening for the longest time. We're like, what's going on? Like, I thought they had this great opportunity. So to see this tweet, the article, I was so excited because, like, wow, they actually had a Q&A set with this huge band, even though I've never heard of them. but huge on Spotify. So this is what we thought was going to happen from the start. When did we start talking about this app? Over a year ago. It was last summer, right? Summer before last?
Yeah.
Like summer 2021, right?
Yeah,
So
it was quite some
it's
time.
been around a while. Yeah. And it's like, this is what I was expecting. But yeah, interesting that they weren't even equipped to handle, the servers couldn't handle as many people. We don't know how many people showed up, but it must have been a lot to bring the whole thing down. So I put in the nest the tweet from Spotify Live that actually like apologizing to the fans, and then the band itself saying that they're proud to have crashed because, hey, that's actually probably kind of cool. They can say, hey, we crashed the servers, but they're also disappointed with the experience because they didn't get to have their Q&A. So at least we know it's going in the direction now that we had hoped we would see, because it is Spotify. It's like one of the largest places to go for music fans to listen to music. It would make sense to incorporate social audio as part of the experience. And this was exactly what I thought we would see. At minimum, Q&A with bands.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to admit, before Spotify came along, I felt like that was such a great use case for Clubhouse. Then Spotify popped up and I was like, yes, they're going to take this. It's going to be brilliant. And then, to be honest, Amazon AMP is doing a fantastic job, it would appear, of kind of at least presenting music in, allowing you to incorporate music into what you're doing. What with that and the kind of the anchor playlists that you can create podcasts, again, leaning on the Spotify music catalog that you've got there. And you just think, well, bring all that together, Spotify Live. It's still a standalone app. That's still a bit odd to me. I don't know. They just don't seem to have got their act together with it, do they?
No, not at all. So hopefully we'll see some improvements moving forward. Hopefully they've learned some things and it'll improve 100% moving forward. We'll see. Time will tell for sure.
Absolutely will. Absolutely will. My last story is actually back to Spotify, but rather than being social audio related, it is more audio related. Spotify is going to be introducing audiobooks to US users, catalogue of 300,000 titles to start with. As I understand it, it's going to be in its own separate audiobooks tab, which even podcasts, I think, at the moment aren't. Although I think there's been a bit of campaigning around that, and the fact that, that would be a really good way to filter out podcasts from the music content that's in there. It is going to have a slightly different setup in terms of purchasing. There's not going to be any in-app purchasing when you're scrolling on your phone. So you will be able to preview an audiobook from your phone, but you'll actually have to go online onto desktop to make that purchase. The file will then be uploaded to your account and you'll be able to listen to it via your mobile device, but you're not actually going to be able to have that as an in-app purchase at the moment. That's something that they're not doing, which I think is different to what Audible does. So yeah, interesting to hear that they're bringing audiobooks into the mix. Spotify, massive audio company, obviously, already there with music, definitely trying to make headway with podcasts. I think recent stats showed that they're the biggest host at the moment over in the US. It flicks quite regularly between Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but I think they're up there in the top spot as it is at the moment. And now bringing audiobooks into the mix as well. So yeah, interesting to see them do that. Okay, let's chat about Clubhouse then, Michael. Tell us all about the lounge.
Well, I will give my insight, and if anybody else in the audience, looking at you, Morgan, wants to come up to the stage, they can as well. But the lounge is really quite a fascinating little implementation for social audio, because basically what it means is that when you go now onto a house page on Clubhouse, you are immediately in the lounge. And anybody else who is already in the lounge speaking, you will start to hear them. And so that's something to be aware of as a user. If you're around other people, if you don't have headphones in, you could just start hearing people speaking if you go to check the house chat or any of the other number of other things you can check while you're in a house. So the implementation is actually quite clever. They almost have like what I call a mini player on the house page. And in the mini player, you can leave the lounge so you no longer hear it. You can unmute yourself so you can speak in it while you're still on the house page. You can also swipe through the user icons that are on there, and you can see who is speaking at the time. who's unmuted, who's just listening. And there's also, you can see emoji and GIF reactions in that little mini player, just like you can in a room. Now, if you tap on the lounge stuff, especially like the words at the top of it, it will take you into a room that is called the lounge. And like you had mentioned earlier, there's very, very basic, a very basic setup in there. There's no moderators. You can't change the audio quality. Nobody can pin any links. It is just a space for people to talk to each other. And I think the idea from Clubhouse is that people will first start chatting in the lounge, and then they'll say, well, let's take it to an official room. And then you could just start a room in the house. You can title it whatever you want. You have all the pinning of links and audio controls and everything else that you want. And so the lounge is really just meant to be sort of that first touch point. When you enter a house, you could start talking with other people and then take it from there. So, it's the thing that I find fascinating is what else could they do with this little mini player? Where else could we possibly see it throughout the Clubhouse app going forward, and maybe even other places besides Clubhouse? I don't know. We'll see. But I'll close my mic there.
Thanks for sharing that, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, what I can add is like the traditional big picture context here. So this is really a tool for community building. So for those who don't know, what a house is a collection of people who've been invited to be there, and it's intentional. It's got a purpose. So this is a group of people that you want to be doing a thing with. And one of the challenges as a community builder is to try and get those people talking to each other, because many of them won't yet know each other very well. So you've invited them in, and maybe you know them because you've invited them, but they haven't really got to know the other people in the house yet. And this is the most lightweight, simple way to get people to have the chance to have like little quick chats with each other where they wouldn't before. So they don't have to start a room to do it. And of course, starting a room, there's a lot of psychological stuff there, and you feel like it's a commitment, and maybe you don't know these people yet. So do you feel okay starting a room? But this is a way of like having these like casual chance bumping into each other. So you basically, you go into the house, and the house is like a group chat, and you're reading the chat and things, but you can also hear anybody else who's there right now too, if they've chosen to be talking to each other. So you go in and you're met with a live conversation of other members. So you might hear a voice that you've never heard before and think, oh, they sound really nice, and I didn't know that person. Or maybe somebody says something and you think, oh, I have something to say about that, or I'd like to talk to you about that. So you can very quickly hop up and say, oh, how are you doing? Nice to see you, or something like that. So it's these background connections that you need to establish between people in a community so that it really forms a community. And that's what this is trying to do.
And interesting that there's no mod there, as we've kind of mentioned already. So essentially there's no kind of muting someone, but then you wouldn't necessarily need to, because those people have been invited there, and so you expect them to kind of behave in a manner that in a public room potentially people don't. But yeah, okay, yeah, that's interesting. I jumped in earlier today into the lounge over for the room that Michael has set up over on Clubhouse, and I guess what I was slightly confused about, I was the only person in there. I was in the lounge on my own, which in my house is you're never in a room on your own, so I was loving it. But what I wasn't sure about was whether or not anybody else who's a member of that room would know that I was there. Like, do people get notified that there's someone sitting in the lounge by themselves? Or is it just if someone comes across and, as you say, they've jumped in to catch up on the chat, which is what I generally go over there to do?
Yeah, so they will do, but it depends how they set up the notification. So if they follow you or your mutuals, there's a good chance that they might be told about that. But the other thing is, when you're in there, it actually shows up as a normal room in the public hallway. So not that it's public, but anyone else who's a member of that house might be browsing their hallway, and they'll see you in a lounge room, so they can join that way too. So
I see.
Yeah, people do get notified, but there's also different ways to discover them.
Interesting. Michael?
I think a good analogy that I had heard from one of the users on Clubhouse was thinking of the lounge sort of as the mailroom of an apartment building. And you can have these chance encounters as you come in and out of the building and say, "Oh, hey, how you doing, Morgan? Oh, Suze, good to see you. How's your day? What have you been up to today?" And then maybe you're like, "Hey, come on over to my place and let me show you this new whatever thing I got," or something. Then you could take it into another room of the house. It's still your community in that apartment building, that house, but it's a more intentional space than just meeting in the mailroom per se.
I love the way you describe that. That's awesome. Go ahead, Morgan. Sorry.
No, just once again, this is an example of Clubhouse has really changed direction, and they're using social audio as a way to have community and get to know people. And it's much less now, I think, a way to build audiences and have shows. So it's just a different way that you can use speaking to each other.
It's great for community building. I mean, this is perfect for that. Really strengthening the relationships of people in the community. Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.